Hi all. Last week I hyped up the fact that I had ordered a Canon EOS RP to get back into photography for the first time since right after college. So almost a decade of not working on photography, this thing that I used to love while I was in college. And here it is, the Canon EOS RP arrived this week. I've been playing with it, already taken maybe 100 or so shots, a couple on Instagram, a couple on our dog's Instagram. But this is my new baby. Really loving it, really getting back into taking photos and editing photos, especially with Lightroom, which is also new to me. Used to be purely Photoshop back in college, and even that has evolved quite a bit since then. But Lightroom seems to do almost everything I want, not a need to jump into Photoshop. Anyway, this camera has one feature that I didn't know existed when I bought it, and I really want to talk about why I think it's great for anyone learning photography, or like me, perhaps relearning photography. I'll show a better, clear image. I don't know if you can see that, but that is flexible priority. Now, there are other priority settings on most cameras, DSLRs and mirrorless cameras like this one, where you can say, I really want to focus on this setting and have the camera adjust everything around it. So maybe you're doing shutter speed. You're really worried about getting that shot in sports photography, or your kids running around, your dog's running around, so you want a high shutter speed. You set the camera on shutter priority, and you say, I'm going to adjust the shutter speed, you take care of everything else. Well, flexible priority is like that, but you don't have to decide in advance what you want the camera to focus on and what you're going to focus on. So let me pop up this image from another camera I was able to find that I can use. You can see those settings. That FV means flexible priority all the way over on the left, and then moving to the right across that frame, we have my shutter speed, aperture, exposure, and ISO. Now with flexible priority, I can set any number of those, and then the camera will adjust around my settings to try to get the ideal shot. So, following some advice from my college photography professor, I picked one thing at a time to focus on, and this week I was really concentrating on my aperture settings. So if I was doing a portrait, or just one object and I wanted the background blurry with that nice bokeh effect, I might open up the aperture, set that to a low number. This lens that I got can go as low as 1.8. I might set it around a 2 because I often want, the subject has some depth. So maybe a 2 to get the full face of my dog, or all the petals on a rose, or something like that. And then the camera will adjust all the other settings around that. Now what I noticed as I was taking shots is sometimes the camera settings will leave things just a little overexposed or a little blurry, because it was concentrating on upping the sensitivity of the sensor with ISO all the way on the right there in that picture, or the camera was concentrating on shutter speed when I really thought it should have been the opposite. So maybe there was some camera shake going on because the camera had lowered the shutter speed, when really, because I was doing this photo handheld, I needed the shutter speed to be at least about 1 over 60, or 1/60th of a second for me. That's about how steady my hands are. And instead of lowering the shutter speed, I really needed the camera to up the sensor's sensitivity with ISO. And so I might take a shot, realize, oh, the shutter speed was too slow, and the ISO was a little too sensitive. So using my own knowledge, I would adjust the camera's suggestions, but if I didn't, the shot would still look pretty good because the camera is trying to adjust around the aperture setting I had. And that's why I love this flexible priority setting. It's not quite manual, it's not auto, and it's just not one at a time priority. It lets you pick what settings you want to mess with and then adjusts around you. So you could do full manual. And in fact, if I'm in flexible priority mode and on my camera, if I hit the down arrow button, I think by default that is return everything to auto. So in flexible priority, the camera will switch everything back to auto when I hit that. So if I'm just trying to get a quick shot, I don't have to fiddle with the dial getting back to auto. I can just hit the down arrow and back in auto, take the shot, and I essentially have the same as the automatic setting in the camera. Or if I want to start dialing in that shot, I can do it one setting at a time, maybe adjust my aperture, take a shot, and then see what the camera suggested, see how that shot looks. And if I think, oh, that shutter speed was a little too slow, or, I would have taken the shutter speed and ISO in different directions. The camera did maybe the opposite of what I would have done. And because I'm the one taking the photo, I now just change those to what I would have done to get a really good shot, the style and the way I wanted. Or if one day I just want to work on shutter speed, I can just go to that shutter speed and flexible priority and leave the camera to everything else, knowing that if I have a shot where I really want to dial something in, it's right there for me. It's not hidden because I'm in that flexible priority mode where the camera is putting all those settings in my face, telling me what it recommends, and then letting me adjust, and then adjusting around. I really like that. I think if you're learning photography or getting back into it and you're working on those technical details like ISO, shutter speed, aperture, the flexible priority is a really cool mode. And that also goes to something I've mentioned that my photography professor back in college told me, fix everything except for one thing at a time. And she included in that focal length. So for starting out, I've actually bought this 50mm fixed focal length lens. It's Canon's newest version of what people call the Nifty 50 or the RF lens system, or RF mount system. And I cannot adjust the focal length. This is not a telephoto lens. I'm not worried about zooming. I am fixing that focal length and worrying about other things. So there was actually some really cool shots with birds this week that I passed up because I don't have a telephoto lens. I'm not working on that right now. I want to keep that fixed and think about moving myself and the camera to compose the shots. And then once that gets really frustrating for me, I'll go ahead and get the telephoto. So I fix something until it's frustrating for me not to, and I really feel it for a long period of time. That's when I'll make the investment or dive into those settings or surface those settings to start fiddling with that. I want to fix a thing until I'm frustrated that I can't change it, because that's the sign that I've learned enough to need to change it, when I'm frustrated that I can't. So if you're learning photography, getting back into photography, 2 pieces of advice. Fix everything except for one thing. Maybe it's aperture, shutter speed, ISO, exposure. If you don't know what those mean, I'll link a Peter McKinnon video where he sort of walks through those settings with the analogy of a bowl of cereal. It's crazy and brilliant. Fix everything. 2, if you are buying a new camera, think about one that has a flexible priority mode. That's Canon's name for it. I'm not sure what Nikon or Sony's would be. And get that so that you can have some coaching from your camera that also gets out of your way. The camera will immediately accept your settings if you change them, but it'll be suggesting things for you. And if you want to see all its suggestions, on my camera, you just hit that down arrow, shows you all of its suggestions. You make an adjustment, it shows you its suggestions for the rest of the settings. Very cool. Those would be my 2 pieces of advice coming from someone who's just getting back into photography, but has a little bit older background.